Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the 2020 Teacher Leader Summit virtual series. My name is Christina and I will be your session host moderator. We ask that participants keep microphones and videos off for the remainder of the session. You are attending session L082, ELA Guidebooks, Distance Learning in a Low-Tech Environment for grades 3 through 8. Allow me to introduce our presenters today, Holly Jesse and Emily Kaiser.
Hi everyone, my name is Holly Jesse. I work for the Louisiana Department of Education and I work on the ELA content team for ELA in grades 3 through 12. And I'm going to let my counterpart, Emily Kaiser, introduce herself as well.
Hi everybody, I'm Emily Kaiser. I am part of the ELA content team and I'm going to be answering your questions in the chat box today. So while Holly is presenting, if you have a question that comes up, I will try to get it answered for you.
Great. Thank you, Emily. All right, if we can go ahead and launch our poll. You are in the Adapting ELA Guidebooks for Low-Tech Distance Learning for grades 3 through 8 session. I just want to kind of get a feel of who's in the room. So if you can select your role at your school, and then what you think will be the most difficult obstacle you will face as you transition to distance learning, just so we can get a feel of how you're feeling today. Just about 30 more seconds and then we can close out that poll. All right, so good news. It looks like everybody is in the right place. We have lots of teachers, a few instructional coaches, and a handful of school leaders and school system leaders. And this is really going to be focused to support those school systems that need to come up with a solution for students that will not have any access to devices and connectivity in order to engage in high distance learning. Okay. All right, so by the end of today, you will be prepared to convert ELA guidebooks to a low-tech distance learning model using the requirement, like you will understand the requirements for text access, what is available as a print-only solution, ways to provide feedback and supports to your students in this unique environment, and how to offer meaningful flexibility in low-tech and blended learning models. As teachers and school leaders, I am pretty sure that over the past few weeks, you've had to tackle some interesting challenges. I know for a fact that all of you have pulled off some superhuman tasks. I know that my team and I have shared in these feelings, but I was recently asked to figure out a way to teach ELA without text. And that's when I realized that I had found my kryptonite. And that is why the first thing we're going to dive into today is text access. We know that text is at the center of instruction, and that access to complex grade level text is our most powerful lever of equity for our students. Many districts were implementing guidebooks well, but only had a class set of text. And when schools shut down, the inability to send students home with their required novels and unit readers left teachers with little choice in how to convert to high quality curriculum in a distance learning model. Both our high-tech and our low-tech solution require the same text access. So that's something that as you are thinking about, if you are a school that is doing a blended model, it's important to know that the text access solution for every unit is going to be the same, whether you are incorporating the high-tech or the low-tech version. Our contracts for unit novels and unit readers are secured through American Reading Company and Xanadu. And this is where you would need to go to purchase your individual text access. When you access ARC's purchasing portal, which was linked on the previous slide, you will see this notification that's going to explain the annotations and the messaging that has been added to help make your purchasing for distance learning easier. You'll notice that while you should still be buying all of the unit text to support regular implementation, text needed for distance learning for individual student access will be marked with an orange house, and text required for independent reading add-ons, and we'll get to that a little bit later, are going to be flagged with a blue reader. For example, when you navigate to that portal, let's pretend that I am a school that has been teaching the Whipping Boy for the past 4 years, but I've only had a classroom set of texts. What text as a teacher do I need to make sure my kids have independent access to in order to complete distance learning activities? And if y'all can just chat it out, which text would I need to secure independent copies of for my students in order to teach the Whipping Boy in a distance learning environment? Great, so I'm seeing lots of people selecting the Whipping Boy and Knights and Castles. Which text is going to be that optional independent reading add-on? Great, Knights and Castles. So here's where I'm going to ask you a question. Knights and Castles has an orange house and a blue reader. Why might that be? For anybody who's familiar with this unit, this question's going to be a little bit easier for you to answer. We're saying that it's required, but also the optional independent read. Anybody who's familiar with this unit, care to share through the chat why Knights and Castles works as an independent read? Great, thank you, Brittany. We only have sections being read, and Ashley, good, y'all are with me. Lots of Whipping Boy fans here. Only a section of Knights and Castles is read, and it's actually an excellent text to build background knowledge. So we think that students should have it for the unit to make the unit work in a distance learning environment. And since they only read a small part of it, reading the rest of it is what they would do with that optional independent reading activity. Thank you all for your participation. The other way that that might look is like Out of the Dust. You'll notice that Out of the Dust, there is a completely new text added on as the independent reading novel. So if I am just doing Out of the Dust and I do not want to have my students engage in the independent optional read, I would only purchase individual copies of Out of the Dust. But if I wanted to have that flexibility and that add-on of building knowledge, I would then also purchase individual copies of the Great American Dust Bowl, which, just FYI, is a pretty amazing graphic novel if you're interested in that type of thing. So here we're just going to pretend that we are making an order, and all of this is through the portal. And I know that most of your districts take care of this ordering for you, but I think it's important for you as a teacher to make sure that you will have access to the things that you and your students are going to need for success. So if I am teaching grade 7, The Giver, and Written in Bone, I need to make sure, and I have 150 students in my classroom. For the Giver unit, I have decided I do want them to do the independent read. So I would order 150 individual copies of each of those texts to add on to my regular classroom text so that I would have the materials my students need to transition to distance learning. If I am teaching Written in Bone, I may or may not have made the decision to not include the independent read option, and that would be, I would leave that off. I would purchase those 2 books because I feel like that's sufficient for my students, and I would purchase 150 copies of each. The second part of text access is just as important and often overlooked. Please be sure that you have your unit readers for every student. Those unit readers are available through Xanadu. And when you navigate to Xanadu's page, which is linked on slide 4, you'll be able to view their products and pricing, and they'll send you the supplemental texts that pair with the anchor text in each unit. So the question that we've received the most is, do I need to teach the units in a specific order? As many of you are aware, the Department of Education has always left that decision up to each school system. However, because we were aware of the text turnaround times, the answer is it depends. In this brave new world, if you have not already secured independent novels for your students and unit readers, and you wanted to teach stories Julian tells in the first 9 weeks, there is an 18-week turnaround that the publishers have promised. So odds are that book will not be there when your kids start school. So when we took into consideration the low tech and the first unit that needs to be addressed in each grade level, we went with the ones that had the shortest turnaround time that best lent themselves to this type of low tech model. If you are also dealing with high tech implementation and you have the text necessary with the orange houses to teach stories Julian tells, you can feel free to do that. However, the low tech model was only built out for these first 2 units. And as long as you have that text access and high tech, you are good to go with any unit. In addition to securing your unit text, you are also going to need the unit materials to complete assignments. And this is where it gets a little tricky between high tech and low tech. While text access is exactly the same no matter what method you are implementing, text materials access does change. In the high-tech environment, you're going to stick with a lot of the things that you are familiar with from guidebooks, your teaching slides, the student materials handouts, learning logs, and you can also add on that independent read option. However, in the low-tech environment, if students are looking for a print-only option, as many of our school systems are, we had to create a whole new set of materials for those students to be able to implement in that way. So your low-tech analog print-only option unit materials will come with your distance learning guidebook companions, and I'll give you some more details on those, but there are going to be 2 per grade level in grades 3 through 8 that will be released for the first round in July. Distance learning guidebook companion feedback guides will also be provided for every unit and will be available by digital access, or you'll be able to download and print them out. And every companion guide will also have independent reading added onto it. So I'm going to pause for a minute and mute myself and check the chat box because I'm sure it's running away and Emily is helping you. But if there are any additional questions that you have related to text access, very quickly. So I just saw a question. If you're doing a combination of high tech and low tech, there is another session about transitioning guidebooks to a high tech learning environment that you can attend or watch the recording when it is shared through the Teacher Leader Library. This session is really focused on helping people understand what to do if you have no other options with your students. So Amanda, I'm going to share those with you in where to see those previews in just a few minutes, but we're going to move forward to the next section, which is the print-only solution. While we encourage all school systems to prioritize high-tech distance learning plans, we recognize that 25% of our students, which actually equates to about 156,000 kids in Louisiana, are not going to have the technology and infrastructure necessary to implement high-tech distance learning. To support school systems in meeting the needs of these students, the department is developing distance learning guidebook companions and feedback guides to ensure all students have access to complex grade level text. Distance learning companions will be developed for 2 units per grade level in grades 3 through 8. So here at the bottom of the slide, and the materials are available through the SCED app, you'll be able to pull up a copy of the distance learning companion, and this is a week sample for Louisiana purchase. I want you to just take a minute to open that up, and we should have the link coming through the chat. If everybody can just take a minute to open it up and take like 2 minutes and put into the chat things that you notice or wonder, we'll just do that quick strategy real quick. So just to reiterate, you're pulling up the sample guidebook companion. It's the student-facing document for 1 week of Louisiana purchase. And you are taking 2 minutes to do a notice and wonder. And I want you to share out in the chat things that you see. All right, so it looks like many of you are recognizing the format of these is really shaped around our ELA goal. The format and structure should be very recognizable to kids who are used to ELA guidebooks. And it's really pared down to get at the essential read, understand, and express understanding for the lessons. Some things that I do want to address. I am noticing that many of you do not want this in a PDF format. You want them to be able to type into this document. We are looking at ways to share that, but most of you indicated that you are going to be dealing with students who do not have access to devices. So while we are looking for ways to share that with you, please keep in mind that if students do not have access to a device, we need to also provide that PDF version. There's one other thing, sorry. So as much as we noticed that someone called out that this does align very well to the guidebook lessons. If you are familiar with Louisiana Purchase, however, you will notice that it is not an exact replica. Each week, in order to make them user-friendly for students, is going to be lessons 1 through 5. On lesson 5, that is for districts that choose to include an independent reading component, and the students would collect vocabulary related to the topic and background knowledge of that unit, and complete this page. They could also, if you do not have the independent reading option and would like to have your kids do this, engage in choice reading. But it's important to understand that these lessons do not correlate exactly to the ELA guidebook units themselves. If we think about this, the guidebook units are meant to have all of these different texts in them. So if I go to Louisiana Purchase, as a teacher teaching this unit, I have access to all of these texts, but if I am a student at home, I only have access to these 2 texts. If I'm in a high-tech learning environment as a teacher, I can do some read alouds, I can share certain things through Google Classroom. There are some options for me to get them this additional information that they would need. But if I am truly in a low-tech distance learning environment, I would only have access to these 2 books and my packet and my unit reader, because every grade level requires, every unit requires the unit reader as well as far as text access. This means that this is streamlined towards the culminating writing task, and it will not give kids the same experience that they are having in class with all of these texts. Therefore, we never want to see distance learning companions being used in a classroom setting, because it is not the same experience for those students. These lessons have also been modified just to share to be about 30 or 45 minutes a day. And just again, it does not replace student materials needed for high-tech or traditional learning options. The release schedule coming in July will be Louisiana Purchase, The Whipping Boy, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Steve Jobs, The Giver, and Flowers for Algernon. The second unit coming in the fall is listed here as well. Xanadu has also agreed to print these continuous learning companions. So if this is a large need for your district, the state contract does include the availability of the continuous learning guidebook companions, and it shows the release schedule of when they will be available through Xanadu. So I think I've seen this come up a few places in the chat. How did we decide on units, which units to make companions for? And the answer to that is we consulted that text availability chart. We could not create companions for books that could not be in the hands of kids at the beginning of school. So while previously school districts might have saved Louisiana Purchase, it was the only text in 3rd grade that would be available in that timeline. So Louisiana Purchase was the only one we could guarantee districts could have in the hands of kids at the beginning of school. And other things, if they have a lot of digital access in the unit, or some books just lend themselves better to being used in the classroom. So we looked for the units that best lent themselves to this type of learning. So the next question is, how does this affect unit choice for the innovative assessment pilot? Real quick, let's send out a poll. I just want to see what my audience is. If you are participating in Louisiana's innovative assessment pilot. If the answer is no, if you are not sure, the answer is likely no. All right, so while the majority of you are not participating in this, I am just going to go ahead and go over these slides real quick, because I do think that it is very important, and it might also help other districts as they think about how to implement this low-tech option with 3 units. So in order to participate in the innovative assessment pilot, You must secure the materials to teach 3 units. The third window must be the social studies crossover unit. What that means is in 6th grade, I can choose Hatchet, Steve Jobs, Out of the Dust, or Witch of Blackbird Pond for my Unit 1 test. The same choice exists for the Unit 2 test. However, the Unit 3 test, everyone participating in the pilot must take If Stones Could Speak. If I am a school district that requires distance learning companion documents because my students need this low-tech option, I would have to go back to my list of what companions are being created. The first one is Steve Jobs, and the second one is If Stones Could Speak. However, I can't teach If Stones Could Speak in the second 9 weeks because I have to teach that third unit as If Stones Could Speak if I'm participating in the pilot. Many districts that I have reached out to and spoke to have made the decision that they will convert Out of the Dust to their own learning packet. And we are trying to put together a place where teachers can turn in resources to the state that will be able to vet and share so that all districts are not doing this work at the exact same time. So do you have any additional questions related to our print-only solution? I'm gonna go ahead and mute for a minute and check out the chat. All right, it looks like we're okay. So I'm gonna jump into the next place, which looks like many of you are worried about how you're gonna support your students as they complete this work. So we know that frequent, timely, and targeted feedback and support are essential for student learning to occur. If we just send these packets home and we have no interaction with our students and we offer no support and no feedback, they are not gonna learn. So a low-tech environment should still be grounded in the shifts. While the task should allow the students to achieve success independently, this does not mean that the students should not engage in rigorous work. Students should always be asked to engage in work that is meaningful and helps them develop into strong readers and writers. Teachers need to create systematic plans for providing feedback and supports for students in response to their work. So essentially, we want to avoid busy work for our students. We want to make sure they know when we're giving them things that are to take up time, and they know when they're being given things that are helping them become stronger readers and writers. And if we give them meaningful assignments, they will produce more meaningful work. With that idea in place to support distance learning feedback in a low-tech environment, with every unit, you will have your student weekly packets and a feedback guide, which is going to be made to accompany every companion. Each feedback guide will include guidance for supporting learning at home. So I just want you to take a minute and access the link, and I think it's going out in your chat. Yep, it's in there already. If you can go ahead and access that link, I'm gonna give you 2 minutes to look through this document again, and if we can share out things we notice and wonder. So again, if you can open the feedback guide and chat your things you notice and things you wonder about. So I'm going to take this attempt to put a few of you on the spot. If you wouldn't mind unmuting. Michael, I noticed that you said phone conferencing with 120 students could be difficult on a constant basis, and written comments will probably be a staple, unfortunately. I can't help but agree with you more, but I want to challenge you to think of, is there a way that you could use telephone conferences and written feedback to support your students?
Yeah, and you might just have some kind of like a conference call, a group call that you could get students who are, you could put them on teams 3 or 4 so that they have a chance to, that might build, some opportunity together on their own time, and then conference call with them as a group rather than 120 individual calls. That knocks it down to 40 calls or 30 calls that might be more doable on a weekly basis or twice a week or whatever you could manage.
So Michael, first of all, thank you so much for being brave enough to unmute so I don't feel like I'm talking to myself this entire time. And I think that you are spot on. There are ways for you, every free conference calls lines are available. I'm not sure if y'all know that, if you just Google free conference call. And what I loved about what Michael was saying is the way he's thinking about how he supports diverse learners and grouping students who need similar feedback and similar guidance and talking to them in a group environment. So that wasn't even where I imagined you would go, but I love that answer. Does anybody else have any idea of how they would minimize the amount of independent telephone conferences in service of written feedback?
Holly, Laura had a really good suggestion. She suggested grouping students by their needs. Students who required similar feedback, you could do a conference call with those students and kind of, almost like a small groups via phone. I thought that was a really neat idea.
Awesome. Yep, so if I am checking their written work and I am able to basically check off that these students are getting it, they might be able to get by with just written feedback that week. However, if I am noticing that there is a serious problem with my student not hitting those look-fors, I know then that I need to intervene, and I can be a little bit more purposeful. I love the ideas that I'm seeing in the chat and teachers sharing ideas of getting Google phone numbers. Unfortunately, I do not know how to solve the problem for having disconnected parent phone numbers. I know that that is a real obstacle, and hopefully we can work to solve some solutions around that. And I've also seen concerns about spotty service, and I hear you and we're there with you. And I think in those situations, we just have to rely on written feedback. I love the data-driven phone calls comment. All right, so this is just kind of going to give you an overview of some of the things that are there when you are doing your phone conferences. It doesn't have to just be a quick sit and get. You can take a few minutes to use your strategies that you would utilize in the classroom, to use teacher talk moves and those guiding questions to help your students refine their answers. Having the look-fors in your hand will help you ask those prompting questions to get them where they need to be. As far as written feedback, if your students are really struggling with that writing assignment, send it back the next week with an additional organizational frame stapled to the back and say, you know what, you did a really good job with this. Let's focus on getting our answer, like all of our thoughts in this kind of organization, and see if you provide that organizational frame support, if the next week they can turn in something that meets the look-fors. So student look-fors for each lesson will be provided in the feedback guide. This is really something that if parents have a cell phone, you could share the link to this PDF and they would be able to access some of those links for support. For example, the support for background knowledge, they could access these links. That's why we typed them out in case you wanted to print this and give to parents. We do realize it is a very hefty document, so I recommend digital access, but even if you just wanted to print the first few pages for parents so they could type in these web links, there are going to be some supports for supporting students in writing, supporting students in organization, supporting students in reading. It's just going to give them a few more options than they would have had alone. So do you have any additional questions related to feedback and support? I'm gonna go ahead and mute for a minute as I give y'all time to drop comments in the chat. And the last thing we're going to talk about is meaningful flexibility. I know that many of you are trying to think through, as I can see in the chat, how to run distance learning and in a high tech and a low tech and a blended environment. And the answer is there is no simple answer, but we have a few suggestions that you should take into consideration as you meet the unique needs of your students. We know that face-to-face classroom time involving traditional implementation and synchronous online learning should always be prioritized, but we recognize that if school buildings do not physically open or if a platoon model is implemented, the time available for those types of interactions are going to be limited. That's why it's important to remember that learning and activities being sent home with students should be meaningful and always in service of helping kids master the knowledge and skills demanded by the ELA Guidebook unit. Our approach to adding meaningful flexibility were those independent reading add-ons. We saw those on the American Reading Company portal. Those are the texts that were added to the units with the blue reader. Every unit in grades 3 through 8 has a designated add-on text that is thematically or topically related to the guidebook unit. We know that research shows us that while reading is important, reading-related text is the best way to build our students' vocabulary and comprehension of a text. So we are developing independent reading protocols to deepen students' background knowledge and vocabulary skills. Knowledge packets are being developed in grades 3 through 12. More information will be released later this month. And choice reading protocols, if you are just looking for options to keep kids reading while they're at home for a day and with you the next day, you would still teach your guidebook instruction while you have students in your classroom, and then they would have a choice reading novel that they could complete some protocols for. And more information will be released later this month on that as well. In addition to being useful in this distance learning environment, I think it's important to call attention to the fact that we're using this time to develop resources that are just going to support implementation and strengthen your ability. Our feedback for the diverse learners and small group supports as we added those layers in 2018 was that teachers lacked materials to do small group instruction in a meaningful way, and were having to create those for themselves. So if we only go back to traditional classroom, these resources are still useful because it's going to make your small group instruction more meaningful for your students. You can use these supports and the targeted additional supports for diverse learners to engage your students independently with more flexible options. If we are in a platoon learning environment where kids come to school for a week and go home for a week, they can get high quality in-person instruction with their teacher while they are in class learning the real guidebook unit, and they can go home and read a great graphic novel and complete some independent reading protocols and build their knowledge of the Dust Bowl and come back to school more prepared and with a deeper understanding of the Dust Bowl and that unit as a whole. And distance learning guidebook companions, one lesson per week is reserved for that independent reading. So those are the 3 ways that those meaningful flexibility options are incorporated. Do you have any additional questions related to meaningful flexibility? All right, so the lovely Emily has tagged for me. Laura had a really good question. Will only 2 distance learning companions be created? How will that look if we are in the middle of a unit that hasn't had materials created for low tech? So I am going to just scroll back real quickly to this chart, because this chart is what informs all of our decision making. If I am a district where the majority of my students are going to need this support, I will probably start my year with this unit. Because if we go to school and we get sent home for whatever reason after a week, my students wouldn't have anything to finish. The other option is start with Hatchet. If school shuts down in a month, you send kids home with Steve Jobs and you transition to that. And then when school reconvenes, you would open with Hatchet or create some distance learning resources to teach Hatchet in the 3rd quarter. Unfortunately, I know that's not the most perfect answer, but all of these situations are kind of a little flexible, and we're just trying to help you make the best decision possible for your students, as every school system's populations and needs are very different across the state. All right, so that being said, what updates will be made to the Strong Start guidance? I know that this is a session on low tech, but many people have asked the question about digital text access. If we can chat out the link for the Strong Start guidance. We have been in touch with many publishers. Xanadu is working tirelessly to try and get access for permission for digital access, and no singular solution exists, but we are releasing some guidance about digital availability of text for school systems to explore if that is an option for you. And since this is a new update and many of you are doing both, I just want to share with you if you are interested in digital options for trade books, we have a list for every grade level with the most common platforms. Please be aware that this is not a list of free text. This is something that would require purchase or sign in for your students. And in order to support our students with disabilities, on the final tab, we have the accessibilities feature that shows you out of these platforms what accessibility options are available for students. So that's just a new little thing that I wanted to point out for you. I do think it's also important to think about the user experience as you think about digital text. Students working on a Chromebook with one screen may or may not be successful at toggling back and forth. And those digital permissions are typically for 12 months. So the Strong Start document is shared in the box. It is also linked on Louisiana Believes in the Strong Start document. And all I did to get to the digital text access was go to the text access page and click digital availability. We have a way to provide easier access to ELA Guidebook units that I am going to share a sneak peek with you today. So we're very excited about that. We are searching for additional ways that we can address unfinished learning in grades 3 through 5, since we know that some important foundational skills were missed due to school closures. And we are trying to create a guidebook resource bank. So if teachers are interested in participating in that program and learning more, you should contact us at ELA Guidebooks at la.gov. Essentially, you would submit your low-tech version of Out of the Dust, and we would vet that and then post it for teachers to share openly and freely across the state of Louisiana. And this is just where that document is linked. If you have not seen it before, the session materials are available in Sched, and you'll have access to this deck and the link. And now for the sneak peek, you are the first people to officially see this launch. So we are very excited to show you that we have come up with a solution to make, while this is a low-tech situation, as a teacher, I would have loved to have my own editable files, and the zip files were always a little cumbersome to navigate. So we are announcing the most up-to-date ELA content is available on Louisiana Curriculum Hub for grades 3 through 8. And I'm just going to walk you through that process. The link for Louisiana Curriculum Hub has been dropped in the chat. For those of you who do not know, the Louisiana Curriculum Hub is the platform that was developed to support the 9-12 units. And just as a little like sneak peek, those units are there and all the materials, which is really cool. So if you haven't taken a look to see what is the new generation of guidebooks, go ahead and take a look at that in your spare time. And I just want to make sure that I show you how to navigate this bulk downloader. So if you look at the disclaimer on the bottom, it will hopefully calm your fears, because there's going to be a few things that sound a little scary, like authorize and give permission. But I'm just going to walk you through what that process looks like. So if you are interested in accessing 9 through 12, you click on them and it opens that digital platform that I just showed you. However, if you are interested in accessing the 3 through 8 content with the diverse learner supports, we have implemented the bulk downloader tool. This tool is going to allow you to download full units of ELA Guidebook content to your Google Drive, and they will be available in Google and in Google Docs and Google Slides. So if I am a 4th grade teacher and I would like to teach Pushing Up the Sky, the first thing that I need to do, and this is critical, so I hope that you're all listening, I cannot add any materials unless I have a folder, because while you're giving this program, it's called a bulk downloader, permission to put files on your drive, well, it will not create a folder in your drive. So you have to go to your drive, and I'm logged in as myself, and I need to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it ELA Guidebooks. So once I create that new folder, I have a place where I'm going to store all this content. I am getting ready to teach Pushing Up the Sky. I go ahead and click Authorize. You'll get to see my many Google accounts. You select the account that you would like to provide permission for. Allow. And this is where you can preview the content before you download it. So if I wanted to preview what the Pushing Up of the Sky unit is, I could open this. However, this does not allow me access to edit any of these materials. And you'll notice that very familiar structure of unit and section if you've been utilizing the zip files. Key updates that have happened in the unit folder, you now have a Get Started page that will have all of our approach guides, learning tools, and instructional strategies. And in the section folder, you'll notice that we have eliminated the clicking between multiple files. For additional materials and slides, everything that you need for Pushing Up the Sky Section 1, Lesson 1 is available here for you to bring into your Google Classroom. So that is the preview. You'll notice that I don't have, well, you won't have access to view those files. It kicked me back into my other account. It'll be view only. So you don't want to request access to those files, because what you want is not my files that you can't edit. You want a copy of those files in your Google folder. So you don't want to go through this request edit access, and you certainly don't want to copy all of these files alone. So what you do is you head to the bulk downloader, you click on the folder. If you did not create a folder, this will be empty. But since I created that folder because I knew I needed a place to store these materials, I select that folder. And you'll see that the bulk downloader is now telling me that it is loading a list of files to copy. This is, I love that somebody is using a clapping emoji. Every once in a while I catch a glimpse of the chat. I'm glad y'all are as excited as we are, hopefully. So it is copying the files, it's checking the folder, and I'm just gonna do a split screen right here. And again, these are extremely large files, so it will take some time. And while we are waiting for all this magic to happen, I will field any questions that you have. Oh no.
Holly, that could possibly be because we're on Zoom and we're using a lot of bandwidth right now. Like, that could possibly be what's going on.
I'm sure that's what's happening, but it kind of takes ta-da, finished.
I know, it did take the ta-da out.
We'll just try one more time. If there are any questions, Emily, did anything come up that maybe we should address whole group? That
I don't see one. Amanda, I see your question. I'm going to ask you if you can email that to ELA Guidebooks. I might be able to give you a better answer there than in the chat. But most of them are excited, as you should be. And we promise it works well. Ellie just backed us up and said she used it this morning and it worked well. So
now that we've launched this to all of you, I'm sure everybody might be trying to do this at the exact same time. And the Zoom bandwidth issue. And I will say that as this is happening, you will have to often refresh your folder because it doesn't come through in one group. So you'll notice that it'll take a while before all of the folders navigate. But as you can see, oh, it's done. Yay. So I can open all of these materials. They are mine to access. I can put them into my Google Classroom. I can make copies for kids in Google Docs. And I just think that this is a solution that many of you were looking for. I know some of you are trying to convert all these things on your own. So hopefully we have made your life a little bit easier.
someone figured out how to do emojis.
Nice. All right, so as always, we have like 6 minutes left, which we can let you unmute, ask some questions, but as always, please send any information you have to elaguidebooks@la.gov. If you are interested in partnering with us to create some open and free resources for teachers to share, everyone here is our best developer for this content. You are the ones in the field doing this work with your students, and we would love the opportunity to give you a place to share that so that people can work smarter and not harder. And if before you leave, you can make sure to take a minute and give us some session feedback. This slide will walk you through how to use the Teacher Leader Summit app to provide feedback. It really takes less than a minute. If you can just let us know if you were happy with this content, if we didn't cover something for you, what needs do you still have? You can use the happy face or the sad face. And if you can just provide us some details about what you're still looking for, what questions you still have, or what you found very helpful, that would be great. I appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much.